Gavin, to get us started today, on the back of SPS and the current macroeconomic indicators, what do you see in Germany specifically and the global market more generally?
There's been a significant change in the macroeconomic issues that are facing most industrial companies around the world, but particularly in Germany, which is, of course, the economic powerhouse of Europe and leads the industrial sector in the European market. So, the key things that have changed in the last year are that there has been slow growth, very little growth in overall GDP. And of course, the disruptions that we saw from the pandemic, namely the supply chain disruptions and the disruptions in the way that people were working from home versus in the office, have somewhat abated. So those have normalized. But what actually happened this last year has the potential for continuing into 2025. And that includes a very slow growth in industrial manufacturing and the transition in energy from fossil fuels to green energy has been a key trend that has started to become a significant part of the economic environment and strategic planning for industrial companies. The last thing that's really critical is that there's still an enormous amount of geopolitical uncertainty, and that has created some pressure on the part of senior executives with respect to future investment. Of course, as we know, inflation was high and interest rates were high, and those have moderated, and they're expecting to continue to moderate. But it's this uncertainty that I think is clouding some of the investment frameworks for many of the key executives in the industrial sector. And I think this is where we are looking at what the 2025 market might actually portend. Is it going to ease up a little bit? And are companies going to increase their investment? Or are we going to see this very steady, slow growth that's going to hold capital investments to a minimum? So I think what we should be looking at in our discussion here is how these key forces, starting with this uncertainty relative to both geopolitical uncertainty and the fiscal uncertainty, and then the current situation in industrial manufacturing, how they are going to shift in 2025, if at all, and what that means for industrial company leaders, both with respect to strategy and then the implementation of those strategies in sales and marketing, in manufacturing operations, and others.
Yeah, and of course, what we're seeing at the same time is that buying and selling needs are changing, really accelerated by the pandemic. Per Gartner, for instance, 80% of buying interactions will occur in digital channels already by 2025. And 5% of the buying journey is all the time that sellers get. And that's obviously very little time where the differentiated value of increasingly complex solutions needs to be conveyed. Another interesting statistic from Gartner is that there are said to be 8 decision makers in the average B2B buying group, which are each doing their own research. And McKinsey published that 70% of top tier customers want a consistent experience across channels. So that's a lot of complexity that these organizations are dealing with. It's also pretty in line with what we've heard at SPS and see at global enterprises. And there are largely two paths that we see companies, but also divisions and regions are taking in this challenging, changing context. Firstly, we're seeing a path whereby the focus is inward and very much on cost cutting. Organizationally, we're managing for the short term, very much internally focused, often siloed sales and marketing. There's budget scrutiny, and marketing is often seen as a cost center there. Going to market with product features and SME bandwidth is often considered a constraint, while strategically the companies and divisions are slow in changing and execution, but also in scaling. So there are small experiments happening, but not scaled over the regions and different languages. Whilst at the same time, there's a reliance on past success. So essentially doing more of what got them there. And yeah, there's obviously a lot of companies going or that have gone through acquisitions and mergers, and messaging from these we often see at the organizations are not integrated, resulted in patchwork messaging. missing actually some of the value against point solutions. And to respond, there's often a wait for the challenge to pass or something else to happen first. But as we know, tomorrow never comes. So that's really one path, that inward cost focused path. And then there is the alternative path that we see companies and divisions are taking, which is much more outward focus and looking at market share growth. So whilst the pie is actually smaller, getting a larger piece of that to grow and really taking an investment approach to spending. Often looking at the midterm and being results focused. So looking at up and cross selling, shortening the sales cycle, improving conversions, measuring ROI, data driven decisions. So really leveraging innovations to get ahead. And especially as the markets are more under cost pressure, to combat commoditization, focusing on a consultative value selling approach. So sales really being expected to be trusted advisors for customers really to understand the differentiated value faster. Sales and marketing thereby coming together really to add value across the customer journey. And these companies adjust agilely to the market where the sweet spots are, and therefore covering the market faster and more effectively than the competition. They quickly scale experiments across regions and languages, but also look to scale the sales force, sometimes not being able to grow the sales force, but still being able to cover a larger part of the market and really getting the sales teams onboarded faster. Also delivering value from mergers and acquisitions faster. So focusing on the holistic propositions around the customer specific challenges, personalization, and really highlighting a specific value by persona conveyed consistently and globally. So really enabling the next generation of sellers and buyers. And whilst we could do a session and show examples of any of these, we obviously only have a limited amount of time today to discuss the findings of SPS, really looking at the different approaches we're seeing companies take in light of these pressures. And the question is really the path your organization, your division, your country is choosing to actually take to not get further behind in light of all these pressures while competing for that smaller pie. And we also see, for instance, McKinsey publishing that market share winners are 55% more likely to be planning to introduce cutting-edge sales technology, and B2B companies that provide the best omnichannel experience are improving their market share by at least 10% annually. So there's a lot of research that has been done that can help us choose the right approach that will actually set us ahead. Gavin, any thoughts from that?
Well, I wanted to ask you, you've talked about how companies are doing this, but I don't actually know of companies that are doing this in the German market. And my question is, there's this weakened economic position. You've talked about the other change, which is the change in buying behavior and the effect of these new strategies on companies. What do you think it's going to take for the operational leaders, people in charge of sales and marketing and operations, to actually start to implement an adjustment to these new realities rather than just continuing to do the things that they've done in the past? I think, in fact, what's going to end up happening is you're going to see very tight budgets. And so the tendency will be to hunker down and do the same thing that companies have done before and maybe do less of it. What do you think will have to change in order to get these companies to recognize these two different pressures that you've talked about and to actually adjust their approach?
I think firstly, being aware of this tendency to keep your head down and hope it passes. And also the reward of actually being change minded, adjusting to the market conditions, and not actually waiting too long for your competition to outperform you. So I think really initially that awareness is key. Looking at the budget as an investment, not a cost, allows, I think, a real evaluation of which expenses make sense. So doing more that was done in the past will get you where you're now. And obviously, different strategies are required in the current context. So therefore, we see that the companies that are most successful are actually having a deep customer focus, using innovations and not just sticking with what they have to actually get ahead, and being able to get to those sweet spots faster than the competition. Part of it may be micro experiments if you don't have the full budget freedom as we'd all love, but really seeing, okay, which pieces of the customer journey can I make more effective? So therefore, how can the customers understand faster why they should change from when they're currently, and what makes your solution better than the competition? Because ultimately, that's what customers need to understand in order to pay the premium.
So I think that then I would summarize by saying that the economic conditions and the macro conditions are not going to change this coming up year. If companies want to succeed, in other words, they want to either grow their market share or improve profitability or maintain their competitive position, they're going to have to change something that they're doing. Rather than hunkering down and doing less of the same things, they have to change something. And one of the most important things that you're recommending they change is to have a value based customer focus in their sales and marketing rather than a more traditional approach to outbound features and functions and letting the best product win in the market, because that's ultimately not going to succeed given the way that the customer buying behavior has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing that yesterday, being based in the Netherlands, I think I can speak. Also for Europe, we've seen other parts of the world really going at it much faster to get some of that competitive position back. It's crucial that changes are made and that we don't continue to do the same that got us where we're currently.
Great. So I think the sort of watchword then for 2025 is don't expect to be here at the end of 2025 with significantly better results if you're not prepared to change what we're doing. And that other companies in other areas of the world are going to start eroding market positions. And so we're going to end up in a weaker position than we are now, just because those other companies are, in fact, going to leverage these innovations in customer buying behavior, and they're going to use them in these significantly challenged economic times so that we really are forced. These are imperatives. These are not the kinds of things that we can choose to ignore in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And we obviously also see from the research from economic downturns that the companies that are actually brave to make the changes are getting ahead when the market starts to pick up. So just simply writing it out is getting you further behind on the long term.
I think all of the industrial companies in Europe really have an opportunity to advance in the face of some significant pressures, but to end up in a much better place than they are today and to position themselves for further growth as economic conditions improve. Yeah.
Thank you for
Great.
the chat today. It was nice to reflect on SPS, and I'm sure many of these will follow. Thank you.